this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Yes, I'm repotting in the winter again. There's a reason. There are certain types of plants that in my environment are better off well away from that late spring, early summer period because they're cool growers. If you repot them in the more traditional time, they don't get a chance to settle and get some new roots into media and stuff like that before the heat starts building up. So it's so I tend to move my cooler growers away from that hot period. It seems to work okay for them. And this is a Masdevallia, which in theory is a cool grower, but as it's a hybrid, it's difficult to tell. It's actually got a name. It's Elizabeth Janza, so Masdevallia Elizabeth Janza. And from advice from some others, basically, I grow all mine in moss. What they didn't tell me was that they grow it in live moss, and there is a difference. And I was talking about my few Masdevallias because I haven't got many, and Wade put a comment up and said that over the years he's found that the small seedling bark with some chopped up sphagnum and some perlite works best for the Masdevallias, obviously in his environment. Well, if you watch Wade's videos, he's got a giant version of the same environment as me, quite honestly. He does use inlet and extractor fans. He does keep his humidity pretty good. He's got different grades of light around the place. He has a huge volume of air space, and that's quite important for control. The smaller your air space, the more difficult it is to cope with changes, like simple little change like the sun comes out and hits your glass. Now, in a small environment that will rocket the temperature. In a much larger volume of air, it happens much more slowly and is more easily controlled. So if you're going to get a greenhouse, get a giant one. Take out a bank loan. I can't do greenhouses. This isn't my house basically, and I don't want a building separate from the house. I'm happy with my setup as it is. But nonetheless, you wouldn't notice it generally speaking, but Wade's setup is quite similar to mine. Apart from being in the other side of the world, of course. But nonetheless, when Wade says that's a good mix for Masdevallias in his environment, chances are it's a good mix for mine too. So that's, I've only got 3. One's already in that mix, more luck than judgment, and 2 are in moss with a bit of this perlite in. And this one is starting to show new roots now. And at this time of year, it's coming out of here. This moss goes right down into the bottom of an air cone pot, so the air cone pot is virtually useless for a start. It's not going to do any good at all. Now, I don't need to worry about cleaning this off or anything like that. All I need to do is get the worst of this moss off. It hasn't been in this pot a huge amount of time, and I didn't pack it in tightly. I just put it in loosely. I will be interested to see what's happening with the roots on this plant. This was a plant that just wouldn't grow. It just sat there doing nothing for so long, and to the point where it had been in the pot long enough that the media was probably breaking down, so it had to come out. And I tried it in the moss, and it has started to grow some new roots, so it did improve. But I don't think it improved because it was in the moss. I think it improved because the media it was in was old, and now it isn't, if you see what I mean. So that was probably the main difference. And I've got some nice new roots coming out here. Not a lot, but some. And some is good. We've got some nice new roots showing. There's not a lot of them, but nonetheless, it's not a big plant. Yeah? Strictly speaking, it's probably 2 plants. It's growing in 2 separate directions. And Masdevallias die back in places, often in a circle. So you start off with a little plant in the middle, and it starts pushing out round the sides, and gradually those parts of the plant build up, and it gets bigger and bigger, and the bit in the middle is dead, because it's the oldest part of the plant. the plant doesn't live forever, so you can get areas like this that have just died back, yeah, and that piece is going to come off, but not now. I'll do it with the scissors in a minute. But I've got some roots and got some dead ones in the middle. That's probably from last time I repotted it, but I don't want to disturb it too much. I just want to get it in some new media and give it a chance to grow these new roots on into a more airy mix, basically. So we'll, I'm not washing this off or anything, that's it. I won't reuse the moss in case there's anything lurking in it. So all I'm going to do is I use this stuff, and it is full of dust. Health warning, do not breathe that dust in. I don't know what this is made of, but it's some sort of expanded glassy silicate thing, and I'm sure that don't do lungs any good, so if you're in doubt, wear a mask. I just tend to take a few pieces out and then put them in there and break them up, so I'm not handling the dust or throwing it around, but you can see how much dust is in the bottom of that bag. A lot, and the more you move it, the more dust you create. It can be washed off, that's not a bad idea. Like, put it in a sieve or something, run the tap over it, get the dust off, but the amount I've used here that's just not necessary, quite honestly. I'm going to mix some new moss in with this. I still want a fair percentage of moss in here. I don't want it all bark. The Masdevallia that I've got, that I've had a while, that's doing the best, is in mainly bark and perlite. I don't think I put much moss in with that one, but it does dry flipping fast, and obviously these should stay moist. I mean, this time of year, if they get dry for a short period, it doesn't do them too much harm, as long as the temperatures are really low. They're not growing as much perhaps, but Masdevallias like it cool, so in theory they're in their element in the winter. They are in my grow room anyway. But the important thing with Masdevallias and the like is just keep the humidity up, and then you don't have to worry so much about what's in the pot. The air humidity is paramount. They love it. You look at where they come from, you've got a job to see more than about 10 metres because of all the mist and the fog and the high humidity levels. And as a consequence of living higher up the mountain, mainly cool temperatures. There are a few Masdevallias come from down near the coast where it's actually quite warm. So there are exceptions. There are normally exceptions to any rule, quite honestly. Anyway, that'll do. That's enough moss in there to keep it moist. Excuse me, enough of the perlite to keep the mix open, and enough of the bark to do its job. I'm using a small pot. It's only got a small root system, doesn't need a big pot. If it grows into the pot and starts hanging over the edges, then I'll do something about it. It's an air cone pot. I like to have some air circulation in from the bottom, and I've put some chunky bark in there to make sure that airflow gets in the base of the pot. The last thing you want is the top of the pot bone dry and the bottom of the pot absolutely dripping wet, because what are you going to do? If the roots are all throughout the pot and the pot's like that, you end up having to water it when a part of the pot is still really soggy. So you're over-watering part of the pot and possibly under-watering part of the other. So a nice even distribution of the moisture is what's required throughout the pot. Right, so we can just set this up nicely. As I say, the roots haven't gone down deep yet, but they are there. Should I bother taking these old bits off or not, or am I just going to disturb it too much? There's a new root there that I don't want to disturb. Yeah, that piece will just come off. It's an old part of the plant, and now it's actually separated the plant, which is not what I wanted it to do, but nonetheless that does give me an opportunity to make a more even plant. I didn't want that to happen, and it might have been better if I'd not been so lazy and got the scissors out. Anyway, it's done now. I want this quite high in the pot because it's going to go down as I add the media. So I'll start high just wiggle the media around. Delicate roots, these are not strong, sturdy, strappy roots, they're delicate roots. You push down on them, they will break. And they do branch, but not a, you wouldn't call it a branching root system. They tend to have roots that push down. You do have branches occasionally, but in the main you tend to get lots of single roots that push down into the pot. I'm just gently pushing down the outside of the pot to hopefully stabilise it. Oh, I hate it when I've got perlite in the mix. You can hear it crunching. It always sounds like it's doing damage. And then just very, very loosely around the base of the plant. I don't like the base of the plant buried more than just a tiny little bit, and only when that media is nice and loose. A lot of those roots come out right at the base and they need hydration around them. So I'm just trying to keep the sponge rock away from the surface at the moment. I just don't like the look of the stuff, quite honestly, but it does a good job. I think that will do. Now often when I pot in the larger stuff, I don't water for a day or two. It depends on the type of plant, but there are times when I don't water for a day or two. But with this bark is bone dry, it's small bark, so I will water this in, and that will just settle it down. So I've got that little piece that I took off that I want to make sure is secure. Hopefully that has got roots on it, it will still take. If not, the remainder of the plant will do its job. So there we go. Don't need a new label for that one. The one that's got is perfectly adequate. Just having a look and see if... yep, that actually came from Ecuagenera. And I can now safely say that is the sole survivor. Let me think, that would be 3 years ago at Malvern. On the last day they started discounting their plants quite dramatically, and I didn't have any Masdevallias. I thought we'll give those a go. At that price, if they all die it's not the end of the world. They were selling them very cheap, and I bought 5 I think, and this is the sole survivor. This is it. So we'll give that a water, put that back in its clay pot. The reason I keep them in the clay pots is the clay pot has a cooling function. It's evaporative cooling or something it's called. So when I water my Masdevallias that are stood in the clay pots, I make sure the clay pot gets wet, and then as that evaporates it helps keep the roots a little bit cooler. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, quite honestly, but yeah, so there we go, little Masdevallia, got in its new home, fits in there nicely. Those, I've got a few of these and a few of those, and these are sort of brilliant for things like Paphiopedilums that need their roots in the dark. Masdevallias don't necessarily need their roots in the dark, but they like their roots cool, and the clay pot does the job. A plastic pot wouldn't do that. And for a Paphiopedilum it could just as easily be a plastic pot, but they like their roots in the dark. These are not so fussed. I've seen Masdevallias mounted and growing perfectly happy as long as that air humidity is high with a bit of air movement as well, and they'll be happy. But the cooler they are, the happier they are. So we'll see how that one comes on now. I'll be interested to see if there's any rapid development due to the change of media. As I said, there were some new root tips in there. I'll be interested to see how quickly they get to the edge of the pot and start filling that pot up, if they do, of course. So that'll do for today. I haven't got much else to do today actually, so see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.